So the objective of this class is to show you how the components of a CQRS architecture corresponds to the files in a CQRS based application. So basically we have this architecture right here, and I also have the complete system or the complete application, demo application built using the CQRS architecture. I'm going to be explaining all the files you see here, all the Java files and the Kotlin files, and also show you how they correspond to each of the components in this architecture you see here. The reason this is very important is the CQRS architecture is a bit challenging to understand, but once you understand the basics of it, how the information actually flows, how the architecture connects to the complete application, you'll be able to appreciate and be able to do it yourself very easily. So that is what I'm going to do. I've actually done this explanation here in my website, so you can actually read what I'm saying now, but I'm going to give a bit more detail right now. Or maybe my website contains more details, I don't know, but let's go ahead to get started. If you are joining for the first time, please hit the subscribe button so that you don't miss an update, because this is a way to program for the future. We are actually preparing to program for the future. So if you know CQRS architecture very well and you're able to develop applications using CQRS architecture, you are immediately, automatically, you have an edge over every other programmer out there. That I'm guaranteeing you. So let's go ahead to get started right now. The first thing to realize in the CQRS architecture is that there are two sides to it. The first side is called the command side, and the second part is called the query side, and that is why we have the name to be CQRS Command Query Responsibility Segregation. So let's start with let's go from bottom up, because it becomes easier that way. Now we have two different data storages, okay? We have the write DB and we have the read DB. Now the write DB contains, just assume for now, it contains the object that we are going to store in the database, and the read DB contains the same object that are going to be stored in the database as well. Now the write DB is synchronized to the read DB, okay? Take note of that. In webinars or in some in tutorials or in lessons, they call it the read model. You hear something like the read model and the write model. They are about the same thing, but now for all practical purposes, these are the same thing. So in an application being built, you see them having two different names, but don't get it mixed up. They are referring to almost the same thing. So at this point, I'm going to show you the read model and the write model. In this case, we are talking about storing a gift card. We have a gift card application, and this gift card application in this case, we have gift cards. You can see this is the read model. We have gift card, we have the ID, we have the constructor, just like your normal object. So this gift card you can see here annotated with as aggregate. So if I go back here, so we have this annotated with as aggregate. Okay, that is fine. So this is what you know. Now the same thing at the other side, we call it the read model. Okay, so in this case you annotate it with as entity. So it's more like what you already do in normal programming, when you have entity and use Hibernate to do ORM to store these entities in a database. So in this case, we have as entity, okay? So when it comes to aggregate, to store data, to store the read model, or to save the read model, to save the state of the read model, we are talking about something called event sourcing, okay? So we are talking about event sourcing as a way to save the states, or to save the state of the changes being made in the aggregate or in the object or in whatever you call it. Now when we go to the read model, to this side, we are talking about an entity annotation, or we are talking about saving this actual object in a repository, in a database table, normal database table. So the read DB is synchronized to the write DB by means of events. So I'm going to show you the two. So we have this gift card is annotated with @aggregate annotation, and it has the ID. This time we call it aggregate identifier. So the same thing at this point. I'm going to go to show you the read model. In this case is the same gift card, but it's called card summary. Okay, card summary is the same as gift cards, but in this case this is for the read model. Okay, and we annotate it with @entity annotation. So now it's clear to you. We have the read model, we have the write model, having different annotations, being in different files, but basically they are the same thing. Just consider them to be the same thing at this time. So let's move on to the next one. So if we continue on the command side, we need to specify some commands that are going to be executed. So commands are intention to make some changes in the aggregate. For instance, you want to create a new gift card, you want to modify a gift card. So in this case, you need to specify the names of your commands. In a CQRS architecture, you need to specify the names of your commands. In this case, we have two commands, the issue command and also the redeem command. The issue command creates a new gift card, and the redeem command creates a new the redeem command modifies a gift card by deducting some amount from the balance. So I'm going to show you these two commands at this point. So if I go to under command, we have API and we have the two commands specified right here. So we say these are intentions, not the actual implementation of this command. They are the intentions. So you need to specify the command name and the attributes that are going to be modified or that are needed to carry out this modification. In this case, to issue a gift card, you need the ID and also you need an initial amount. To redeem a gift card, you need the particular ID of the gift card to redeem and also the amount you want to redeem. So in this case, we have two items, the issue command and the redeem command. You need to specify them in this way. Now you can put these commands in one package and call this package commands. So let's move on to the next part. Now we also need events. Events, just think of when you have commands, you must always have a corresponding event. So I'm going to come here and say, so we have commands and we have events. So events is a way to synchronize from the command side to the query side. So once you issue a command, once a command is executed, you must trigger an event so that it can notify the read side, because in the read side, there is no commands being executed. So you simply need to update the read model once a command executes. So for all the commands, you must have an event, okay? Then I'm going to show you again. So in this case, I put the two in the same file. We have the redeem event and the issued event. Now, since these events are indication of a command that already executed, their names have to be in the past tense, okay? So in this case, we have redeemed event corresponding to the issue event, issue command. So issue command and issued command. We have redeem command to redeem, to perform an operation to redeem a gift card, and once it's done, you now emit an event or publish an event called the redeemed event. So these are how the nomenclature goes. So again, if I go to my website, you can see explained here as well. So I already explained the aggregate for you. The aggregate is simply the write model. And now let's move to the next part. We have the command handler, okay? So the command handler is simply a way that the aggregate publishes a command. So once a change is made on the aggregate, it has to publish a command. So what it means is, in the aggregate, in the write model, you need to say if a change occurs, publish a command. This is command to execute when a change occurs. So you need to tell the framework that this aggregate should handle this and this command. And in that way, if I go to gift card, this is the aggregate, as you know. So we have, when a gift card is created, in this case we have something like a constructor, but in this case we call it a command handler. So whatever happens here is explained before in the webinar or in the demo. So in this case, we have a command handler for handling issue commands. So when a gift card is issued, we have a command handler to handle that command, and we have to put the command handler in the aggregate to indicate that this aggregate handles these commands, okay? Or this aggregate is able to emit or to publish commands, okay? So we have the two commands. You need to specify them right here. You also need to specify that this aggregate, you need to tell the framework that this aggregate responds to event sourcing, okay? So when a change occurs in this aggregate, it has to be saved, because I told you that event sourcing is a way to save or to log the event of what happens in the life of an aggregate. So the event sourcing handler is what you use to indicate that the event or events are occurring in the life of an aggregate, and this event has to be sourced, or they have to be logged or saved, whatever you call it. So the event sourcing handler is the annotation used, and in this case you have to specify the events that are to be sourced, okay? In this case, the issue event has to be sourced, and also the redeem event has to be sourced, okay? So I've talked about the command handler, okay? Actually, let's see where we are. So okay, so this architecture does not correspond exactly, so there are some things that are actually implicit, okay? So at this point I'm going to go to other items in the application. So we have command handlers, I've mentioned that. Event sourcing handlers, I've also mentioned that, okay? So we talk about the query model. The query model in this case is the cat summary, that is what it is called, and the cat summary is annotated with an entity annotation, and the cat summary belongs to the query side and is stored in actual database. Let's now focus a bit now on the query side. So before we do that, let's talk about the command gateway. Command gateway is simply a feature provided by Axon Framework to send command from the front end back to the framework back end. So in this case, we have a controller, a view, or a UI. So if you want to issue an event, or if you want to issue a command or issue a query, and you need to send this command through the command gateway, through this place. And so the commands are sent from here, and the queries are sent from here, okay? So take note of this. So let's now go to the query side to see what is happening there. So when we talk about the query side, we're only talking about reading data or requesting data, nothing else. It's very easy. So we have the queries here. If I go to the API, I have explained this. You need to specify what queries you want to execute. So in this case, we have the queries to execute. They have to be classes. For instance, we have data query to retrieve list of gift cards or list of card summaries. We have size query. We have other queries. You can write as many queries as you want, maybe find by ID. All these queries that retrieves data, you can write them as different classes in Java or Kotlin, and they are called queries, okay? So in this case, we have only two queries, data query and size query. Once you have this query written, you also need a way to implement these queries. So actually implement these queries to actually go to the repository or and pull out this set of data you want. So in this case, if I go back to the application, you can see, let me see. If I go back to the application, I'll go to summary projection. So summary projection is simply a class where we implement all this. We actually implement all these queries that will fetch data from the database, and this is going to fetch data from the database, and it's going to be handled using query handler. Okay, so the actual implementation of these queries is done by query handler. So you can see these two methods that are annotated with query handler simply means this method returns some items from the database, and the query handlers must have the name handle and take the name of the query that you already defined. I already told you that all the queries you want to create have to be defined as classes, and in this case we have two queries. We have the data query and we have the size query. So any query you define or you want to write, you want to issue to the read model, you need to define it as a class and then implement it using the query handler function handle and specify the name of the query as a parameter. Alright, so we also have event handlers. Now this is also very important. So if you go back to this architecture, once you do event sourcing, Axon Framework kind of saves the events, the state of this event. Wherever I save it, that is not important. But the event handler at this point have to actually save this event or save this whatever operation has been performed have to be saved in a persistent storage. So in this case, when you issue a new gift card, issue command, I told you, then while you have event sourced it or you've sourced it, you also need to actually save it in the database using the repository. And that is where event handler comes in. Take note, event handler is different from event sourcing handler. These are two different things. So if you want to get a clearer understanding, you can actually read from here in my website. I explained it clearly. So in this case, in the summary projection, we have when an issued event occurs, we need event handler to actually write this event to a persistent storage. And that is why we have the entity manager to do this work for us. Sometimes you can also use repository. I use it in a different demo. So you need two event handlers. So take note, if you have two command handlers, you also need two event handlers. You need two event sourcing handlers. So command handlers, event sourcing handlers to source this event handlers to emit this event, and at this time, when events are emitted, we want to actually save it on a persistent storage. So I basically have covered all the bits and pieces of this application. So in this case, I would like to write something. At this point, we have at command handler here, and here we have at event handler, and here we have at query handler. Okay, so somewhere here too we have at event sourcing handler somewhere here. So event sourcing handler for the aggregate, then we have our query handler and event handler happening at the entity side or the read side. So sometimes this can be a bit confusing. I'm still trying to find a clearer way to explain it because the framework for now is still being fine-tuned, especially the documentation. The community is very small for now, but I'm trying to find a way to clarify this. So I'd like to recommend first, read through, try to understand this, and also follow the tutorial to build the gift card application, which I already did. So this gift card has been built, and finally, I'm going to now go to the controller because I should not miss it. So this controller, the very first part of this application, let's just see how it works. So this is a normal controller that you know. So a controller, when you go issue some requests in your browser, this request should be sent through the command gateway, and this is really so interesting. So if I go to the GUI, so in this case we are using GUI, which is Vaadin. So in a different application, we can actually use REST controller to do it. So in this case, we are having, so I don't know if I can make it so easy. Okay, so let's go to the panel. With the issue panel, we have three text fields. When the user enters in the text field the ID and the amount, you simply create a new command and send this command through the query gateway. So you can see it here, right here. And the same way for redeem, you simply send the redeem command through the query gateway. So I'm going to be stopping here, and I'm going to be explaining more as time goes, because it takes some time to get used to the CQRS pattern with Axon Framework. But for now, I would recommend don't give up, try to keep trying to understand it, and with time I'm sure you are going to clearly understand it. I remain kind to the Tech Pro. Please subscribe to my channel. If you have some challenges, do let me know, and we'll see you in the next lesson.